and our sakegraphy masterclass. We are pleased today to, with Nicolas, to receive Amanda Jansen. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. We know since not a very long time. We know from reputation. I was knowing you, but we're very happy to receive you today. And you first, just for the people to know that you are sake scholar and a general manager at Bridgette Bar in Calgary, in Alberta, Canada. So we are neighbor. From I was in Montreal, you're in Calgary, so I'm in Barcelona right now. But you get us so much when we ask you to do a masterclass, and then you said, yeah, okay, let me think about that. And then we received the mail with your story, and it's okay. I will talk about the essential role of the mountain and the sake brewing process. I say, wow, Nicolas. Also, we were so inspired by the theme. You say, wow, and and our quest of Nicolas and I of trying to capture what's the real terroir of sake. If there's any real terroir effect of sake, we've been talking in previous masterclass about water impact, about yeast impact, about the shubo impact, So, and always making a link with, is that the real terroir? And now when we saw that essential role of the mountains, wow, this is amazing because this is a so complex subject and so logical. We never think of that. Japan is mostly 75% of the land is mountainous. So the impact is there. This is for sure. So thank you so much to have choose that. And I know you have been working hard on that. People don't know that, but it's like 15 minutes. We're trying to just get everything together, technology to bring your presentation. Amazing. That's so thank you, Amanda. We will listen to you and just jump in if there's any question. I'm sure there will be questions from us and from the people. And sorry for my voice. It's my late night voice.
No worries. Yeah, please jump in at any time if you have questions, and I really hope that I'm able to answer them. And if I'm not, I'm happy to go figure out the answer if I don't know it right away. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, and for the kind introduction. Like Francois said, my name is Amanda Jansen, and I am the general manager of a restaurant here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I am, named Bridgette Bar. And I've been studying, enjoying, and becoming more passionate about Nihonshu over the past 10 years or so. And I'm so excited to be sharing with you with what I think is such an influential and important factor in the sake world, and that are the majestic mountains of Japan and how they influence and shape the delicious beverage that is sake. So personally, I am very drawn to mountains. I live in Calgary now. I'm originally from Toronto, but I moved out to a small Rocky Mountain town in my 20s. And by surrounding myself in them, I just began to get a real appreciation of what they're about. And when I started studying sake, that appreciation went to a whole different kind of level. Now in Calgary, I still live close enough to the mountains to experience their beauty and their nature. But mountains definitely have a lot of other things to offer us besides their beauty and their views and their leisurely provisions. They're definitely not just for hikers and skiers. So with that, I'm going to bring up my presentation here. Let's see if we can do this again. And Jansen. Share screen. Okay.
Thank you, Nicolas. My voice was close. Let's go. People need to know, if you don't live in Canada, what she was talking about, the mountain of Calgary, some of the nicest mountain range in the world. So, but Japan has its beauty. Look at that, Fuji mountain.
Yes, Mount Fuji. definitely the most iconic mountain range in the country. Although, like you mentioned before, Francois, it's covered in 75% of mountains. So there are a lot of ones to talk about for sure. But mountains are so important for numerous reasons in the sake world, for all sorts of reasons, for their biodiversity, the water that they provide, the clean air they purify, the cultural diversity that they create, and the spiritual values that they also offer us. Japanese folklore tells us that mountains are the source of human souls, and born on top of the mountain and flow down, that bring life and prosperity to the human world below. So my goal for us today is to learn and get excited about mountains and how they make sake special, and pretty much to encourage you and inspire you to drink more of it. So some discussion topics for today. First, we're going to talk about the cultural and historical importance of mountain worship in Japan, and then move on to climatic conditions that mountains create that are ideal for numerous things like brewing conditions, for agriculture, particularly rice growing, and then also the filtration of minerals in water, which I know we've covered before on sakeography, but we'll touch on it a little bit just to round out the subject. And then we're going to move on to some famous mountains in Japan and how they impact the sake of the region that they live in.
Amazing.
So, mountain worship, nature as God. In Japanese culture, nature worship has always played a very, very central role. And this originates from the country's native religion of Shintoism, which worships natural features, including rivers and mountains and streams and rocks and pretty much nature in general. And they've been sacred and associated with the gods forever. These gods, about 8 million of them, they're called kami. And the belief is that these spirits or gods or deities reside in the mountains and the rivers and the waterfalls, and that they're a part of nature in general. They're not separate from it, they are nature. So kami in all their earthly forms results in a feeling that God is everywhere and God is in absolutely everything. The Shinto religion worships at these features, and it wasn't until Buddhism was introduced in Japan that temples started being created for worship. Before, it was just these natural features that were worshipped. So the way of the kami is to be in harmony with all aspects of life. And in all aspects, this means the kami can be both positive and negative and have both good and bad characteristics. They can nurture and love you if they are respected, but also don't get on their bad side because they have a wrath and they will use it. If you're a mountain, you have a lot to offer the world of sake because kamis are supposed to perform a duty based on what kind of object or piece of nature they reside in. So with sake brewing, if you're a brewer, you want to pray for snow, and then you want to thank your God for it. Nature worship continues today with many shrines all over Japan, very close proximity to these natural features, and the shrines honor the god or the kami who live within it. So sake offerings. There are many offerings to give respect to the kami that are pretty diverse and mysterious, but a common act among many religions is the offering. And a lot of this time, the offering is alcohol. If you're a sake brewer, you might be bringing your best daiginjo to the shrine of your favorite mountain spirit. So visiting a Shinto shrine with an offering of sake represents a return to the source. The mountain created all the necessary elements for the sake even to be created in the first place. I'll give the example of Mount Ishizuchi, located in Ehime Prefecture. This is on the island of Shigoku, and every season the snow melts from the mountains, goes down the mountains, and comes out from the mountain itself, and the groundwater flows alongside the mountains, going through all the rocks and the streams and all the good stuff that collects the minerals. At Ishizuchi Shuzo, say that one more time, Ishizuchi Shuzo, it's a brewery that named itself actually after this mountain and the water source, which is probably a big plus in the Kami's books. And many breweries do this, like Hokaizan's another one. Hokaizan Brewery, named after Mount Hokai, usually is located just a few kilometers away from their pristine water source. The mountain's snow contribution to the brewery it provides, and also the low temperatures it provides to create very ideal brewing conditions, is worth an offering. A good sake will depend on a good winter. So again, pray for snow. That is a saying that's very popular here in North America. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it mostly is in regards to skiers and snowboarders wanting to hit the hill. But in this case, pray for snow definitely means you want a good winter, you want good water, and you want a lot of it. So returning this sake to the source, to the mountain shrine from Ishizuchi Shuzo, represents the interconnected energy of the universe, or a Japanese concept called musubi, not to be confused with the spam on rice, about how everything ties together and how we're all interconnected. All right, so there are many different things to give thanks for mountains in the realm of sake. So let's start to expand on some of those.
It's I want to say something, Amanda, what brings to my mind is very interesting to see the difference of two worlds when you compare with wine world. People of wine world and different country don't have the same devotion about mountain impact, but there's impact also in wine. There's a huge impact, and the Mont Blanc and so many even small range of mountain have impact. You go in Chile between Argentina, there's so much impact. The water, the mineral, even on the type of soil. When the mountain went out and the plane fell down, there was a mix of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. It's all about that, but they don't have the same devotion. It's about religion for sure. It's about spirit, the way you see life. But it's like two separate worlds, two universe.
Yeah, and I think Japan has had such an impact on their climate and their geography, just from all the tectonic plates that have moved around and caused this rock and caused this, different rock is everywhere all around Japan, because there's been so many earthquakes and so much movement. And although that's happened in all areas of the world, Japan is a place that's located in the Ring of Fire. So they've seen so much more of it. And you can look at those chalky soils of Chablis and know how that mineral content is going to contribute to the soils. But how many mountains are in France compared to Japan? And because there's so many of them, and it's kind of what they're used to and what they're used to seeing, they are where the gods reside. And it's just such a huge part of their culture.
Yeah, we can see Japan is a vibrating country. There's always vibration, so many. So that's why it's always remind them about the presence of mountain, about the tectonic plaque, So you cannot avoid that. And it's quite interesting.
Absolutely. You can't avoid it is exactly correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned before, Japan is 75% full of mountains, and 110 of these are active volcanoes like Fuji. And as mentioned before, mountains can impact the climate specifically in different ways. So the first way are brewing conditions. Snow acts as a natural air purifier and as a temperature moderator. So in many prefectures, the consistent heavy snowfall at high altitude in mountains acts as a natural purifier, ensuring that the water collected is free from germs and pollutants, which can have a negative effect on the nihonshu produced. When brewing sake, an environment needs to be extremely clean so that the microorganisms involved can actually do their job. A cold environment is facilitated from the snow, and this can be looked at here at the picture on the slide at Tamagawa Brewery in Niigata. I'm also drinking sake right now from Yoshinogawa Brewery in Niigata that also experience these conditions, and I'm sure that most breweries in Niigata do. But that is such a heavy snowfall, and it kind of acts as a natural fridge. Like, it looks like that brewery is inside a fridge. So all the snow piles up on the roof and around the walls, and it's not uncommon for the Kurabito workers to get on top and kind of shovel it off because you don't want your roof to cave in. So this heavy snowfall is also important for the two primary ingredients in Nihonshu, which are water and rice. Yes, of course, yeast and koji are so important and they are a main ingredient, but they are not a primary ingredient because in terms of volume, they don't stand a chance to how much water and rice are used to brew sake. Also, water represents 30 times more rice used in sake. So that's also something to keep in mind. There is a lot of water used and the mountains are providing us with this water. First though, I'm going to talk about rice growing. So in terms of rice growing, mountains are giant structures that do a great job at moderating temperature for rice growing by way of providing diurnal range, and also they block winds and they can direct wind currents. Windy weather can disrupt fertilization of rice crops. Omachi rice is particularly affected by this because of how tall it grows. It's difficult to grow already. So if you have a windy area, it's definitely not the best place to do it. It's nice when there's a big mountain in the way to protect the wind from happening. Also, rice is grown at a higher altitude, like mountain foothills, will experience a higher diurnal range, which is a temperature swing from day to night, which allows the sakamai, which is sake rice, different from table rice, genmai, in a more balanced way. Growing rice also requires a ton of water. The runoff water from mountains helps with this, and also rice paddies are located in areas where a natural basin in the land has formed because it's easier to flood the land and then bring everything back out again. You want to do it in a controlled way, so the basin's going to help with that. During the season, this is done often to promote healthy growth for the rice plants, but you also need to drain it because you need to give the rice oxygen when required. So you got to give it all the water, and you got to take it away. And then you got to give it back again, which requires a ton of water from the mountains. Also, mountains with soils with a high percentage of clay, like Mount Rokko, which we'll talk about later, they have small particles, and these particles are really good at absorbing both water and fertilizer, which are ideal to grow sakamai. Calcium is important for shimpaku growth, which is the starch heart center of the rice and what you want to polish down to with modern milling, how we polish rice now, which is also really, really important. And nitrogen is also important, but sometimes that lacks in the soil. So you have to add it to fertilizers, but that's okay because clay, as I just said, is really good at picking up fertilizer. So the mountain is still giving you the tools that it needs to promote healthy rice harvest. If there's an area where there's volcanic ash, volcanic rock is different from volcanic ash. So volcanoes that are still erupting, if there's ash around, you don't want to plant rice there because it can disrupt the rice plant. Also, different regions are suitable for growing different kinds of rice. Goyakumen Goku is a northern style of rice. So it's really good for the style that they make up north, which is clean and crisp and dry. And then rice strains like Yamada Nishiki are going to grow better in warmer climates. The amount of snow also impacts the water of the region. So heavy snowfall provides a plentiful amount of water. And the quality of water is very important in sake brewing because it's required through the whole process, from washing and steaming to soaking to fermentation to diluting the final beverage to all the rinsing and washing, and all of it is used along the way. Sake is composed of 80% water, which is huge. And the type of water that the brewery uses is going to impact the direct flavor of the beverage and also what style of sake is produced. The picture here on the water slide is this gentleman is holding the rice grain in his hand because he can figure out how much water is actually absorbed into the rice by its weight and how he feels it in his hand. The amount of calcium or magnesium or potassium in this water that is used during soaking is going to directly affect the fermentation process or the steaming process if this rice is being used for koji. The amount of time the water spends with the rice is also important. You'll see this is the mother of the brewery working with a stopwatch to make sure that it's timed to the exact second to absorb all the correct amount of minerals it needs in order to produce whatever the rice is being used for, whether it's kakamai or for koji.
It's very interesting to see the impact of water and now process starting from the mountain, from the growing of the rice and from the process of making the sake. And when you, again, I like to do the comparison for the people with wine. There's no water had. There's water used to wash many things in wine business, but there's minimum of water need in the vineyard. And there's no water added in the fermentation because there's already water in the grape.
In the grape, yeah.
Exactly.
It's so different. And although there's so many similarities across the board, this water needs to be added. The water isn't coming from the grape. The soils need to be high in nutrients. Again, the opposite of wine. But it's like the grape is two ingredients almost. And here we have to have them separate, and they each impart different flavors on the sake and texture and all the good stuff. So it's so cool to see all the parallels and notice the differences as well.
And that's what gives its singularity to sake. You know, we won't never say enough how sake is a singular product and how it's so complex production. It's maybe the most complex processing to make a beverage in the world. So
yes. Okay, continuing. As mentioned earlier, many breweries are built close to their water source, like Mount Ishizuchi. And this could be underground water from rivers, mountains, lakes, streams. And when the water is sourced from nearby, which we touched on earlier, it is the ingredient that offers a sense of terroir or sense of place or local identity to the sake. What the water picks up along the way before getting to the brewery is important. And this starts with pure snowfall. From there, flowing down the mountains and the rivers, it collects minerals, each playing its own role in sake production. More on water. So lots of water. Whether the water is hard or soft is going to affect the fermentation and overall texture and flavor of the sake. Some minerals help fermentation and some don't. But mountains are still going to give us all the minerals that we need to make good sake. Calcium and magnesium are winning minerals in brewing water. So calcium allows yeast to develop and play an acidifying role in sake, and then magnesium influences the development of good koji. These minerals create a rapid and stable fermentation, which is a plus because it limits the possibility of external contamination on the sake. Soft water that is low in these minerals creates a slower and more difficult fermentation, but also encourages aromatic development, which is really good for ginjo sakes. Overall, mineral concentration will affect the final beverage, and that's the important thing to remember. The mineral you don't want is iron. Iron is bad news. It can affect the aromas and make them skewed by affecting the amino acids and also cause discoloration in the sake. Hard water. Oh, sorry, pardon?
No, sorry. I was to say this is again another difference with wine. There's iron in wine, and this is not a problem, but there's no iron normally in sake. So, and this has an impact also on taste and matching with food, especially with fish. So it's another subject, but it's very interesting.
Cool, great. We'll talk about that too, one time.
Yes.
Yes. So hard water is rich in calcium and magnesium, and that will usually produce a sake that is dry and rich in texture, And then soft water will produce a more refreshing and aromatic sake that is rounded on the palate and usually slightly sweeter. Most of Japan uses soft water for brewing sake, and the country is full of it. Certain kinds of rock, like limestone and chalk, like we talked about just at the beginning, introducing with Chablis, they import more minerals into water, and therefore they make water hard. But this is common in other areas of the world and not Japan. Japan, again, 75% mountains, has a land of volcanic rock and granite rock. So minerals are present, but in addition to the land, all the fast flowing rivers stemming from the mountains don't even allow time for the minerals to be picked up in the water before they get to the brewery source. The higher the peak, the quicker the flow. Japan has mostly soft water because of this, but of course there are exceptions of the scale of softness to hardness, and it differs across the country. The main island of Honshu, the eastern half is mostly volcanic and young sedimentary rock, and the western half is granite. So it can definitely have an impact on the style of sake brewed. So if you think of eastern half being mostly volcanic and sedimentary, it's going to taste a little bit different than the western half. We know the crisper, cleaner, drier styles of the east definitely exist. Some breweries adapt their water to the way that they like to produce their sake, which you can do. And you can also import water, which is really expensive. Water is heavy, not something that I don't think is done often. I'm not quite sure, but it seems like when you have a pure water source, like a mountain at your footsteps, that's where you want to get your water from.
I was reading because it's bringing me so many things, and I was reading a book and some passage written by Mari Shiba, which is an amazing sake connoisseur from Tokyo. And she said each time she go taste and sake brewery, she live in Japan, so she's fortunate to go around and taste. She said she always tastes the water. She has to taste the water before tasting the sake, trying to see if there's a link between the feeling of the water and then the sake. So this is, and she, yeah, you will find that, voila. Sorry.
Yeah. I was turning down my my light on my screen so my iPad won't die so quickly. Apologies for the quick switch there. But yes, but the texture of the water is so different everywhere in Japan and in the wine world too. And it's so interesting how it has such a direct effect. So islands of islands of islands. Japan has lots of islands, and geographically and topographically, it has created natural boundaries that has become distinct for regionalities across the country. So Japan has 6,852 islands, surrounded by 5 major bodies of water. Historically, this gave an inability for other cultures to even access the country, being an island, and also allowed the country to develop a culture that was free from outside influence, and they could do it on their own. On top of that, as mentioned before, Japan is located in the Ring of Fire, where 75% of the world's volcanoes are, and this also helps shape the rugged topography of the country, which means that there's even more of a separation in culture due to gigantic mountains in the way of the land that's even connected to each other. So mountains have created even more islands of culture in the country, with tall structures of boundaries in between regions. These mountains contribute to only some elements of sake regionality, and different elements play a different main role in different prefectures. But 1/3 of Japan can say that they have a distinct style, but the impact of mountains is definitely always present. So with that, let's talk about some mountains in Japan and famous ranges and how they influence sake. So just to get something out of the way, in case everyone's Japanese isn't super great, san means mountain in Japan, but it also means other things. It also means a sign of respect. So if I were to say Mr. Chartier, instead it would be Chartier-san. So it's a sign of respect in that way. And it also means the number 3. Today, it's going to mean mountain, except in the first mountain that I'm going to present, it's going to mean a couple things, which is one of my favorite mountain ranges, and that is Dewa, which are 3 sacred mountains of Japan located in the Yamagata prefecture. So Dewa is the ancient name for Yamagata region, and it's located in northern Tohoku, which is up top, cold, mountain, snowy country. And the name literally means place of mountains. The Dewa range is known to be where mountain worship was first established. And taking a trip to these mountains is supposed to be a journey of spiritual rebirth. The 3 mountains of Dewa, or Dewa San, notice double san, mountain, and there's 3 of them, are specifically important to the Shugendo tradition, which is an ancient Japanese tradition that is very self-disciplined. And it's a combination of Shintoism and Buddhism and all indigenous religions of Japan. And the practitioners of this religion are called the Yamabushi people, or mountain people, or mountain priests. And they're hermits who used to actually live in this mountain. And they went through very strict training, very respected training, probably the hardest in Japan, and like sitting under waterfalls, like the picture here. Also hiking through Dewa San, hiking through these mountains for endurance and meditation, also practicing martial arts. So the symbolic nature of these 3 mountains are life, death, and rebirth. And the first mountain that we have is Mount Haguro. So Mount Haguro represents the world of the present. And this is the shortest of the 3 mountains of Dewa San. So it's the closest to Earth. So this is the mountain that you wish for happiness in your present life, because it's the closest to the world that you live in. The next mountain is Mount Gasan. So Mount Gasan is the highest and the furthest from the world below. So it represents the afterlife. And the concept of Kanabi Shinko outlines that spirits need to spend 33 years in the other mountains, so the little mountains below, before they get to Mount Gasan. So when you go visit Mount Gasan, this is the place to go visit your long lost ancestors, ones that would have to have died at least 33 years ago. When you get to Gasan, you have to participate in a purification rite at the entrance. So after you're purified, which involves the water of the mountain, you make a prayer at the shrine altar, then you drink some sake, then you light a candle, and you're good to go for the rest of your hike. Because Gasan is the tallest and gets the most snow, it's the tallest of the 3 mountains that's actually going to contribute the most to sake brewing in Yamagata. The god actually of this mountain is named after the moon, and his name is Tsukiyomi no Mikoto, and it's probably because the mountain is close to space. Mount Udono is the last one, and this is the heart of the 3 mountains, and definitely the most holy. It represents the future or rebirth, and is known as the place of regeneration. And people come here to worship the water that pours over copper cliffs, which is pictured in the slide here. So each mountain actually has its own shrine, and there's a collection of shrines as well, because Mount Udono and Mount Gasan aren't actually accessible in the wintertime. So you have to only go to Mount Haguro, but you can go there 12 months a year to give thanks for all the soft water that these mountains produce, which means that Yamagata was able to become the kingdom of Ginjoshu. 75% of the sake produced in Yamagata is Tokutai Meihososhu, which means it's Ginjo grade and above, which is awesome. And this is double the national average. And this is thanks to the soft water that the Dewa Sansan Mountains and the water and the mountains of Yamagata have to offer Yamagata. Yamagata also has some other famous mountains like Mount Chokai, which is an active volcano, Mount Funugata, which receives a ton of snowfall, and also Mount Zao, which is of the O mountain range and also lends itself to Miyagi, which we'll get to later. The Mogami, or Mother River, is supplied by all of these mountains and distributes the soft water to all around the prefecture. Also, Land of Mountains is very special to the sake brewers of Yamagata, and you'll see the name Dewa on things all around the community, like their prefectural rice strains, like Dewa Sansan and Dewa no Sato, on breweries like Dewa Zakura, or even on branded sake labels like the Dewa 33 label, which is a group of young brewers that are pioneering in the sake brewing industry in Yamagata that really embrace locality in their sake. And this sake needs to be made with ingredients from Yamagata, which are all really special because of the mountains that live in that prefecture. So our next special mountain, this one, is Oroko Mountain and the glory of Nadagogo. Nadagogo is very famous in the sake industry as being one of the birthplaces of sake for sure, and where industry really started booming in the Edo period. So the Rokko Mountains are located in Hyogo Prefecture, and they create climatic conditions for distinct regionality in a few different ways. They are responsible for providing the sake brewing water to Nadagogo, the famous 5 villages, and also they greatly affect the overall flavor and texture and quality of the sake that's brewed there. The mountains also contribute greatly to rice production, and the winter winds historically have created ideal temperatures for sake brewing. So first, we're going to talk about the Miyamizu, and this is the famous hard brewing water of Nada, and it literally means heavenly water. It's created by the underground semi-hard water that flows from Rokko and mixes with the underground water of the Shibugawa River and seas from the Nishinomiya Bay. The bedrock where this water flows has a direct impact on the hardness of the water. The resulting water is so high in minerals that and trace amounts of iron, very, very low in iron, which is the mineral best avoided for all the reasons we talked about before. So this water produces a very dry style of sake in the region that is very, very famous for. In the past, this was a big win because it ensured stable fermentation. Even though a lot of brewers like to use soft water, the hard water in Nada really gives a sense of terroir and regionality to the sake, and it's still some of the most sought after sake in all of Japan. The water from Rokko is also very important because of the power it provides. The fast flow of water that drops off from cliffs is so fast that it can create hydropower. And back in the day, we're talking like more 1700s, the brewers of Nada decided to repurpose the original water wheel, which is pictured in the slide here, as a power source for milling rice. So water would drop off the cliffs, the water wheel would speed up, and now brewers of Nada, they have less labor. There's no people like brewing rice. Rice machines were around until the 1900s. So less labor and also a higher percentage of milling. So maybe instead of 80% of a semi-buwai, you're achieving a 60, which is really, really cool. And very, something that definitely put Nada on the map. Another thing that the Rokko Mountains contribute to is the rice growing of the prefecture. So Yamada Nishiki is grown in Hyogo, and the villages of Nada produce some of the best in the country. Sitting behind Mount Rokko are fields that produce this Yamada Nishiki, and this rice is extremely suitable for making premium daiginjo styles. The diurnal range of the mountains, which are temperature swings from day to night, are ideal for rice growing, and the clay soils provide a lot of minerals. Also, there's petrified wood in this forest, which gets formed when trees get washed down by water and then they get buried under layers of soil where it doesn't see a lot of oxygen, and then minerals sink in, and 1 million years later, it's petrified wood and turns to fossil. So this wood contributes even more minerals to the soil, but also it possesses healing powers and is able to produce a sense of calm and soothe emotions, which I think are also qualities of sake. So I thought that was pretty cool. These fields where the rice villages are is where the village rice system was created. And this ranks the farmers' villages for the best rice paddies themselves in terms of qualities, or the farms themselves in terms of quality. So the best rice fields are designated as Toku A, and they're located in the microclimate behind the mountain. This system allows for distinct regionality of the region with single rice paddy bottlings and also vintage dates on bottles, which is something that you don't always see because not everyone grows their own rice. A lot of people are going to get their rice from Hyogo that live in Yamagata because they want Yamana Nishiki, but they can't grow it there because of the climate or because of the soil or because of the weather that the mountains produce. So this is really cool, a cool way to provide locality in terms of the ingredient of rice and sake. The next thing that the Oroko Mountains contribute is the wind they provide. So there's a north wind that blows down from the south coast of Nara from the Oroko Mountains, and it's known as Oroko Oroshi. This mountain range is located behind the cities of Kobe and Nishinomiya and are formed east to west to shape the winds. Atmospheric pressure in the winter causes winds from the west to funnel through the Asaki Straits and blow strongly across the mountains before they hit the summit, pick up speed, blow down on Nara as Rokko Oroshi. And the inland sea, so you got the Rokko Mountains, and then you have the inland sea, and then the inland sea helps shape these winds and produces an environment that is suitable for cold weather brewing, also known as Kanzakuri, which this prefecture is really known for. These winds also encourage the original style of the brewery in Nara called Kasanegura. And this architectural style means stacks brewery, and it took advantage of these winds. So long structures would be built out east to west with the fermentation room built in the north. So it was clearly affected by the cold winds of Rokko Oroshi. And then there would be another room built in the south. So in the summertime, it would catch all the sun and the light and protect the fermentation room from any heat and keep it nice and cold. Nara has since built buildings as breweries because there was an earthquake in 1995 that caused destruction to all these natural structures. And now with air conditioning being available, the Rokko Oroshi isn't really needed for brewing in Japan, but it 100% shaped the style of Kanzakuri, of the cold weather brewing that the region is known for, and therefore the style of sake in the region. All right, our next famous mountain, which everyone knows for sure, is Fuji-san, which is an active volcano and also a female spirit, which are all volcanoes, actually. So Mount Fuji is for sure the most iconic mountain in Japan. And for hundreds of years, Shinto practitioners would make pilgrimages from one of the lakes at the bottom of Fuji up to the top of the mountain. And only if you reach the top, you will achieve salvation. Pre-1868, only men were allowed to make the trip, which is funny because, as I mentioned, all volcanoes are female spirits. But the kami of the mountain is actually a female, and she is Princess Kono Hana Sakura, which symbol is the sakura or the cherry blossom. So this princess has a whole series of shrines all around Japan, and they're called the Sengen shrines. But the main one is at Fuji, and she represents a delicate, earthly life. And she's also the one that is responsible for Fuji not erupting, And she's done a really good job of that since 1707. And I'm assuming that is because so many people have gone to her to give thanks and offerings. Fuji-san has a major influence on two different prefectures, which are on the slide here. The first being Yamanashi. So Yamanashi, this is a back view of Fuji. So there's views from both sides because the mountain affects two prefectures under sakes. And in Yamanashi, they have a very pristine environment for making sake, but they actually make more wine in this region, which is not typical, but they made wine in Japan before they made sake in Japan. And Fuji-san is a large influence on this. So water here is filtered through granite and gravel layers, and it's even sourced from ice holes that they dig up from the bottom of the mountain. And also here on the north side of Fuji is where rice growing really thrives with optimal diurnal range. And then in Shizuoka is probably a prefecture a little bit more known for Fuji, known as the front face of Fuji. And it sits at the eastern part of the prefecture and receives a ton of snow. And this is specifically important for the kind of sake that Shizuoka creates, which is fresh and fruity and food friendly and very, very easy to drink. And all this soft water is known as Fukui sui, which is filtered through the mountain through basalt rock for up to 100 years. Our next major mountain is Hakusan, and I think it's my favorite of all the mountains that I've learned about. I'm not sure if it's because I just love Ishikawa sake so much, and it's the main source of water and climatic and so many things that we're going to talk about right now. But Hakusan's awesome, and it's known as the White Mountain, pretty much because it gets super white peaks in the wintertime for how tall it is. And Hakusan is a stratovolcano, which is known as some of the most dangerous volcanoes for their eruptions, but that hasn't happened since 1659, so we should be good. So Hakusan has a direct impact on the sake of Ishikawa. Mount Haku is one of Japan's 3 holy mountains, or Senraizan, along with Fuji and also Mount Tate in Toyama, which we're not going to talk about today. But it's the water source for many breweries in Ishikawa and also neighboring prefectures. Ishikawa gets a ton of snow. There's a photo there of some sake buddies and I in Ishikawa. And when I was there, it was the month of February. And I think I can remember snow falling from the sky and the flakes looked like they were as big as my face. It was just a crazy amount of snow. And this pure snowfall falls onto the ranges of Hakusan and then through quick flowing rivers and streams, rivers like the Zidori, they supply snow melt to all the breweries for their sake. The water in Ishikawa is typically medium hard, but the kuras or breweries use this to their advantage to champion the Yamahai production that the prefecture is really known for and produces lots of rich and deep sake. Sake brewed from the water of Hakusan is sometimes referred to as Kaigo no Kizuzake, which means it's clean and crisp and dry and rich in texture, but also complex. And it refers to the goddess of the mountain, Kikurihime. The well that's pictured here at Fukumitsuya Brewery, they say it takes 100 years to filter through the mountains and slowly and sweetly get to the wells of the brewery. And it collects all the good minerals it needs along the way in order to make the sake that the prefecture is known for. So this well goes 550 meters down, and that's where the brewers draw their water from. And you can draw your water from all sorts of different levels of a well. And from that level, it's going to depend on how soft or how hard that water is. Most breweries get their water from 15 to 30 meters. So 550 is super, super deep. A fact I learned about this brewery when visiting was that it was built before the city of Kanagawa. So Kanagawa had to build themselves around it. And instead of the brewery moving, they just said, no, we can't move. This water is so important. This well is so important to us. This is our water source. So they stayed put and now are in the middle of the city. But it's a beautiful brewery, and this well is very, very important to them. In addition, Ishikawa, or actually Hakusan, was the first region in Japan to receive a GI, or geographical indication, for its sake, along with a list of other things like using 20% koji and having a 70% milling ratio. The water must be sourced from Hakusan, or the Todori River system. And this water specification for GI Hakusan will directly impact the sensory aspect of the sake, which is the way it feels and tastes in your mouth. And this is a direct reflection of the water that it's brewed from. The people of Ishikawa love their sake so much that 80% of sake brewed in the region actually stays there and is consumed within the prefecture, which is crazy because I drink a lot of it, and I know it's not 20%, but it's up there. So we're happy North America gets its fair share. Hakusan also has an impact on Gifu, but more so in Fukui, which neighbors Ishikawa, and the water here percolates through layers of rock and becomes the subterranean flow of the Kuzuryu River, known as the River of the Nine-Headed Dragon. I love this story, and Kuzuryu is a dragon god, and there's a few legends with him in it. But in Fukui, they say he appeared when a god of a mountain took his rock door off his cave and he threw it down, and the echo that it created caused the dragon god to appear. And then the rock turned into a mountain nearby, which is in Nagano, called Mount Togakushi. And then the dragon itself, Kuzuryu, turned into a mountain too in Fukui, which is actually now a small ski hill in Ono, which is pretty cool. So the river that's fed by Hakusan has many tributaries that bring minerals to the Goyakumen-goku fields of the Ono River Basin. And these mountains that surround the whole basin create varied temperatures from day to night, optimal diurnal range for growing rice, and they also supply clay soil for this rice to thrive. The picture in this slide is the Hensiji Shrine, which is surrounded by lush forests and is the most famous kokidera, or moss temple, although it's not really a temple, and it was established as a base for mountain worship in 717. All right, next mountain here. We're gonna go to Hiroshima and talk about the Seijo Basin. So most of Hiroshima's brewing water comes from the Chugoku Mountains that were formed from exposed layer of granite. And the rivers that flow over these rocks are very low in minerals. And this gives a unique taste to the water. Also, Hiroshima is known for their umami in their water. So that's the sense of terroir that they're usually going to provide. And the Chugoku Mountains are a huge reason for that. Also, the Seijo Basin that sits in Hiroshima is at an altitude of 200 meters and is surrounded by mountains. And I think something we learned today is the more mountains, the better. So when you're surrounded by it, you have diurnal range, you have air purification, you have quality water sources if you're surrounded, and a cold environment will always be present.
Do you mean, Amanda, that the Hiroshima water, which is a soft one, has some amino acids, some umami directly in the water, or the water of Hiroshima create sake with more umami?
The water that the mountains provide, so all the minerals that the rocks provide and the earth provides to the water has a certain umami to it. And this is known in their drinking water as well as their sake water. So it's not something that's produced with sake, it's of the water itself.
Well, it's the first time I heard that about Hiroshima water. Very interesting. We will.
Hiroshima makes very interesting sakes. They have lots of soft water, but also the sea life and again outside influences and cultural boundaries. It's crazy how neighboring prefectures can make completely different styles and taste profiles of sake. I think Niigata and Nagano are a really good example of that too.
Yeah.
Different rocks, different mountains, different landscapes and topography just equal different sake.
I don't know if there's any book being written on the, what you've been presenting today or tonight for us. This angle of talking about sake style, profile, texture by the impact of mountain is very, very interesting, because mountains are related to the gods, related to the geography, topography of Japan, totally the way Japanese think, the way they live. So it's very, very interesting. There should be a book. Maybe there's already one, but
well, definitely. If anyone is lucky enough to take the Sake Scholar course designed by Michael Tremblay, he talks a lot about mountains and the impact that geography in general has on this. But there's, when you go back to the history and not just the geography and topography, it means so much more. It's the mountain worship that really ties it together, and how it's such a part of the land. And again, that concept of Musubi, of everything being interconnected and tied together, and what they're creating is a direct reflection of what they've been given.
Yeah, in fact, there's many books, many magazines on sake, many wine sake guide who talks about mountain, but not the way you've been talking today, not that deep, that making link to many things. It's very, you get something very inspiring here.
I do love mountains, and I feel like they did a really great job at inspiring me, and sake inspires me too. So it was a hand in hand, which is awesome. Okay, and then I just have one more prefecture to mention.
Yeah,
and that is the prefecture that you are going to probably have the most information on, and that is Miyagi. And the water here in Miyagi is provided by the O Mountain Range, lots of mountain ranges, but the O Mountain Range, including Mount Zhao on the western border, provide the water to the Kitakami River, which provide water to all over Miyagi and other sources in Tohoku, because it is Tohoku's longest river. And also the rice here on the foothills are a great place to grow rice, because it has a wide range in temperature from day to night, which we know is a great way to cultivate rice in Shimpaku and Sakamai. And this prefecture does grow Sakamai, but they also grow a crazy amount of table rice, more than anyone else, I think. And it's used in their junmaishu, which is what the prefecture is really known for, which is really cool. And I was hoping that you would have a little bit more to expand on that for us.
Yeah, Miyagi, it's an amazing place. And the cold effect of the mountain, we can feel it so much. And the sake, this dryness, this the more powerness we feel, and that's why it's a junmai place. It's one of the reasons, not the only one, but it's one of the reasons why Miyagi, it's kind of a not the birthplace, but the one of the most iconic places of junmai. They create good daigenjo also, but junmai is amazing, especially at Tanaka, where we do the project at Tanaka Shuzuten, the project Tanaka 1789 Ikshasi. We went there the first time. We were both, Nicolas and I, said, wow, okay, here junmai. And we rebirth totally the Morikawa-san, who is the Toiji, is a young, completely open mind Toiji, but with the 2 feet and the soil and the tradition. We rebirth him as Junmai-san. So yeah, I always laugh with that, but he's the Junmai king. So but because of that, exactly, this cold weather, this cold snow, this year was a very cold weather. So it was perfect for the Miyagi style, I would say. Was very, very cold winter, a lot of snow. So they were very happy, easiest for them to achieve the production that they were looking for. Their production and our production, because we had changed the path of what we are looking for to make our sake. not because it's better than them. It's just about what we have in mind, what we want to capture. So, but with this cold temperature was perfect to get more honest, like taste, dryness, acidity, sharp acidity in our sake. So there's already a good acidity in those Junmai, but as you mentioned here, some good umami. And sometimes we don't always feel the acidity because of the umami. You know, it's like let's say Chardonnay wine from Burgundy, or compared to some Chardonnay from warm climate. You don't always feel the acidity because this full texture mouth, you know, round palate. But sometimes it could be a lot of acidity. It's a bit the same thing here. So I was thinking was one of the only place that we feel umami in the water, but they didn't know about Hiroshima. So I will go taste the water of Hiroshima and on our next trip in Japan, that's for sure.
Is the reason, I'm not sure if you have the answer for this, but table rice is grown so prominently across Miyagi as opposed to sakamai, but table rice so good that you make sake from it. Is that in direct reflection to the soil that Miyagi has? Or is there another reason for that? Or why have they chose to focus more on table rice than sake rice?
And I think one of the reasons, I don't know all the story about the table rice of Miyagi yet, but one of the reasons was they are a bit far from some other region, from Tokyo especially, and there was on this countryside this mountainous, but there's a huge plain. How is it plain? La plaine. Rice field, but very flat and very interesting for the table rice. In fact, they having also a local rice called Kuranoana, which we will try each year to use more and more, because to bring more local signature, sustainability, help the small grower of Miyagi. As you know, there's a very difficult time for sake in Japan because the consumption is going lower and lower. And now with COVID time, the consumption went again low. So we're trying to having more impact in Miyagi. So we have tasted. I didn't taste yet 100% table rice sake from Miyagi, but I've tasted table rice 100% from other region. Were quite amazing. So this a little bit shaking the foundation of using only Yamada Nishiki top rice quality, you know. But there's a lot of young grower of rice, but especially young Toiji right now changing the path. It's a bit like the natural wine people who's trying to just, you know, doing things differently, not always perfect, but it's pushing the boundaries.
I know it's funny to push boundaries because it's been, oh, do you still see me? Just want to make sure.
Find the way to go. And we feel that in the sake also. So it's quite interesting to see the different rice variety and more working with more koji or less koji. So it's a big change in sake business right now.
Yeah. And Miyagi is so interesting because it does create, has cultivated so many different sakamai actually in the region. I was surprised to see how many were distinct to that region or created in that region, even though they do use so much table rice. So they clearly know how to grow their rice.
Yeah, absolutely. En français, on dit c'est le grenier du riz du Japon, the attic, one of the attic of rice of the Japan. You want to add something, Nicolas?
Yeah, I think about rice, something amazing is happening in Japan right now is all the GI. More GI are creating and more it's precise, you know, the rules inside. If you're looking Akusan, yes, the rules were more the water, and you are looking the last one, there are more and more. And I think that's going to push to give a real identity to all the region. So at the moment, we put like Chardonnay everywhere in the world. And at the end, you go back to what's you got here. For example, in Spain, Charello or whatsoever. And that's what's going to happen, I think, about rice in Japan. They use Yamada Nishiki in a lot of parts because it was a king, you know, a little bit of rice. And step by step, I think with the GI, with the identity, with who we are really and what we want to do and the water and all this new process is going to be like more pushing on what's right, and it's going to be easier to see the identity maybe, and all this stuff is going to clean a little bit, and that's going to be really interesting. I think about the Nihonshu world, we are lucky enough to live this part, you know. In wine world, maybe I was a little bit too young, so I don't really believe it, but thank you, Mr. Chartier, to explain me. No, but about sake, we are all on it, so that's great. That's really, really amazing. Every day is amazing.
Yeah, this move towards locality it's super interesting, and it's going to be exciting to try all the sake that's produced because of it, as these brewers push forward and keep pioneering towards new things, for sure.
Yeah, and we need Toji with, like I said, with open mind, trying to change the path, but having a great knowledge of the past, having the 2 feet on the ground, you know, and that's the only way they will get that. We have one of them. We are very lucky with Morikawa-san at I will say Morikawa-san at Tanaka 1789. He's quite amazing, but I know he's not the only one. There's so many we have met, and they are changing. They are bringing a new, I will say, they are bringing oxygen to the sake world, and bringing complexity of different variety of sake, but by trying to capture the essence of the geolocalization of each brewery. I will say that geolocalization by trying, it's a bit like the sense of place. In wine business, we talk a lot about sense of place. That's what you've been presenting today, a sense of place linked to the mountain, but sense of place. And this is very important. This is the future, I think, of sake, as it is for wine. So thank you so much, Amanda. That was a great lesson. I'm very inspired. I will listen to you for hours still. So
I'm happy to hear that. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And let's make another one day together. And let's hope we met together live with Nicolas in Japan or in Calgary.
In Japan, let's make that goal for